The office party invitation sat crumpled on my kitchen counter, like a piece of evidence I didn't want to examine too closely. Elena had circled the date in red ink 3 weeks ago, marking it on our calendar with the enthusiasm she usually reserved for vacation planning or salary negotiations. "You're not coming, right?" she'd asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. Her fingers drummed against the granite countertop, a nervous habit I'd noticed creeping into her behavior lately. "Wouldn't miss it," I'd replied with my trademark sarcasm. "Watching you schmooze with Grant and the agency crowd sounds like pure entertainment." She'd laughed, but it came out forced. "Nick, you know these things bore you. Besides, someone needs to stay with Maddie." Our 16-year-old daughter had rolled her eyes from the living room. "I don't need a babysitter, Dad. I'm not 12. But Elena had already decided. The conversation was over before it began, filed away under the growing list of decisions she made without consulting me. Looking back now, I should have pushed harder, should have insisted on going, should have trusted the nagging voice in my head that whispered something was wrong. Instead, I spent that Saturday evening exactly where she expected me to be. In my cluttered garage, elbow deep in the engine of a 1967 Mustang I'd been restoring for the past 2 years. The radio crackled with local news, something about the upcoming agency gala at the Waterford Hotel downtown. I twisted the volume knob down and focused on the carburetor that had been giving me trouble. Elena appeared in the doorway around 6:30, transformed into someone I barely recognized. Her black cocktail dress hugged curves I'd forgotten she had, and her hair fell in perfect waves that must have cost a fortune at that salon she'd started frequenting. The scent of expensive perfume, something new, something I'd never smelled on her before, drifted across the garage. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning once like a teenager getting ready for prom. "Like you're trying to impress someone," I said, wiping grease from my hands with an old rag. Her smile faltered for just a moment. "It's a work function, Nick. Appearance matters in my industry." "Right. The advertising world, where everything is about image and nothing is about substance. Don't be such a cynic." She checked her phone, and I caught a glimpse of the screen lighting up with a text message. The name Grant flashed briefly before she turned the phone face down. "Your boss?" I asked, nodding toward the phone. "Just work stuff. Last-minute details about tonight." She kissed my cheek quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Don't wait up. These things run late, and there's always the after-party." I watched her walk to her car, noting how she checked her reflection in the side mirror twice before pulling out of the driveway. The taillights disappeared around the corner, and I was left with the familiar weight of solitude that had been settling over our house more and more frequently. Maddie wandered into the garage around 8, holding a bowl of cereal and wearing the sullen expression that seemed permanently etched on her face these days. "Mom's not coming home tonight, is she?" she said, not really asking. "What makes you say that?" "She packed an overnight bag. I saw her putting it in her car when I got home from school yesterday." The wrench in my hand suddenly felt heavier. "Maybe she's planning to stay at Trish's place if she drinks too much. You know, being responsible." Maddie snorted. "Yeah, responsible. That's Mom." She took another spoonful of cereal. "You know she's been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months? She told me about the Henderson campaign. Big client, lots of pressure. The Henderson campaign wrapped up in January, Dad. I heard her on the phone with Aunt Carol last week. She said the campaign was finished months ago." The garage suddenly felt too small, too quiet, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I set down the wrench and really looked at my daughter for the first time in weeks. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she started paying attention to the details that I'd been willfully ignoring? "What else did you hear?" I asked. "Enough." She shrugged, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. "Enough to know that you and Mom think I'm stupid. Enough to know that whatever's happening, you're both pretending everything is fine." She left me alone with that observation, padding back into the house in her socks. I stood there for a long time, staring at the Mustang's engine and thinking about Tuesday and Thursday nights. Thinking about overnight bags and new perfume and the way Elena had started taking her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. By 10 o'clock, I'd given up on the car and moved inside to the living room, where some mindless reality show was playing on the television. The house felt different when Elena wasn't there. Not better or worse, just different. Quieter, but also somehow more honest, like the walls could finally relax and stop pretending to hold up a happy home. 11 came and went, then midnight. At 12:30, my phone rang. "Nick." Trish's voice was thick with tears, barely recognizable. "Nick, you need to know something. I've wanted to tell you for months." Elena's best friend since college, Trish had always been the third wheel in our marriage, the confidant who knew Elena's secrets before I did. She was the one Elena called when she needed to complain about me, the one who validated her frustrations and encouraged her independence. I'd never particularly liked her, but I'd tolerated her because Elena needed that friendship. "What's wrong?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "Elena's not at the gala." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for so long that they'd built up pressure. "She's at the Waterford Suites, room 412, with Grant." The remote control slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a plastic crack. "Trish, what are you saying?" "I'm saying she's been lying to you. For months. The Tuesday and Thursday late nights, the weekend work trips, the Henderson campaign that supposedly never ended. It's all been Grant. I've covered for her, Nick, and I hate myself for it. I've watched her lie to you over and over, and I've helped her do it." The living room began to feel like it was tilting, like the foundation of the house had shifted beneath my feet. I gripped the arm of the couch and tried to process what she was telling me. "How long?" I managed to ask. "Since October, maybe longer. She told me it started as just drinks after work, you know? She said you two were having problems, that you didn't understand her career ambitions. She made it sound like you were holding her back." October. 5 months of lies. 5 months of Tuesday and Thursday nights, weekend work trips, and overnight bags packed for fictional sleepovers at Trish's apartment. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can't stand it anymore." Her voice cracked completely. "Because you're a good man, Nick, and you don't deserve this. Because she's planning to leave you, and she's going to make it look like it's your fault." The line went quiet, except for the sound of Trish crying. In the background, I could hear music and voices. She was calling from somewhere public, somewhere she felt safe making this confession. "Where are you?" I asked. "Murphy's Bar on 5th Street. I was supposed to be Elena's alibi tonight. She told you she was going to the gala, then staying at my place, right? I was supposed to back up that story tomorrow morning when you called to check on her." "But you're not going to." "No, I'm not. I'm tired of being part of this, Nick. I'm tired of watching her destroy your marriage while you work on that stupid car in the garage, completely oblivious." The stupid car. Right. While I'd been restoring a 1967 Mustang, my wife had been restoring her relationship with her boss in hotel rooms across town. "I'm coming to pick you up," I said. "Nick, I don't think that's—" "You're drunk, you're upset, and you just blew up my marriage. The least I can do is make sure you get home safely." 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of Murphy's Bar and found Trish sitting on the curb outside, her mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. She'd always been attractive in a sharp, angular way that contrasted with Elena's softer curves. Tonight, she looked broken. She climbed into my truck without saying anything, and we drove in silence for several blocks before she finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Nick. I should have told you months ago." "Why didn't you?" "Because she's my best friend. Because I thought maybe it would just run its course and end on its own. Because I didn't want to be the one to destroy your family." I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. The house was dark, except for the porch light Elena had programmed to turn on automatically at sunset. Everything looked normal from the outside, like a postcard of suburban contentment. "Come inside," I said. "You shouldn't drive tonight. I took an Uber to the bar. My car's at home." "Then come inside anyway. We need to talk about this properly." Trish followed me through the front door, moving carefully like someone who'd had just enough to drink to make walking a conscious effort. I guided her to the kitchen and started a pot of coffee, needing something to do with my hands while my brain tried to catch up with the new reality. "Tell me everything," I said, leaning against the counter, and she did. The whole sordid story spilled out of her like poison she'd been holding back too long. The first time Elena had mentioned Grant in a way that made Trish suspicious. The gradual shift from complaints about work to excited descriptions of her boss's intelligence and ambition. The night Elena had called her from a hotel room, giddy and reckless, describing how alive she felt for the first time in years. "She said you two were like roommates," Trish said, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug I'd given her. "She said the spark was gone, that you'd both just given up on trying." "Did she say she was planning to leave?" "Not at first. At first, she said it was just physical, just something she needed to get out of her system. But lately," Trish trailed off, staring into her coffee. "Lately what?" "Lately she's been talking about starting over, about how Grant understands her career goals in a way you never have, about how she's wasted too many years already." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, that would come later. This was something else, something that felt more like clarity. "She's going to file for divorce," I said. "I think so. She's been asking me questions about custody arrangements, about how to protect her assets during a separation. She even asked me if I thought you'd fight for the house." The house. The house we'd bought together 12 years ago, back when we still believed in forever. The house where I'd built my garage workshop and Elena had created her home office. The house where Maddie had taken her first steps and lost her first tooth. "What did you tell her?" I told her she was making a mistake. I told her that affairs don't usually turn into lasting relationships, that Grant was probably just using her for easy companionship. I told her you were worth fighting for. But she didn't listen. She stopped talking to me about it, started being more secretive, more careful. I think she realized I wasn't going to be supportive anymore. We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee and processing the wreckage of everything I'd thought I knew about my life. The kitchen clock ticked toward 2 a.m, and Elena still hadn't come home. "I should go," Trish said, setting down her empty mug. "You don't have to. The guest room is made up." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression, something that had probably been there for a while, hidden beneath the loyalty to Elena and the guilt over keeping secrets. "Nick," she said softly, "you know this isn't your fault, right? Whatever problems you and Elena were having, this isn't how you solve them. This isn't how you treat someone you supposedly love." I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, whether I should have paid more attention, been more supportive of her career, taken her to more of these work functions. "Stop." She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her shampoo beneath the lingering scent of bar smoke. "You're not responsible for her choices. You're not responsible for her lies." Her hand touched my arm, and I felt the warmth of human contact for the first time in months. When was the last time Elena had touched me like that? When was the last time she'd looked at me with genuine concern instead of barely concealed irritation? "Trish, I know. I know this is complicated. I know the timing is terrible, but Nick, I need you to know that I've always thought you deserved better than how she treats you." The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were also clear and honest in a way that Elena's hadn't been for months. "This is crazy," I said. "Maybe. But maybe crazy is what we both need right now." When she kissed me, it tasted like coffee and tears and the kind of desperate honesty that only comes at 3 in the morning, when the world has already ended once and you're trying to figure out how to build something new from the pieces. We moved to the living room couch, where the television was still playing its mindless reality show. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold on screen. This couldn't be me, kissing my wife's best friend in my own living room while my wife was in a hotel room with her boss. This couldn't be my life. But it was. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally awake. The front door opened at 3:15 in the morning. Elena's key turned in the lock with the confident precision of someone who expected to find a dark, sleeping house. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor of the entryway, each step carefully measured to minimize noise. She'd probably rehearsed this entrance, planned exactly how she'd slip upstairs and into bed without waking anyone, ready with her story about the late-running gala and the responsible decision to stay at Trish's place rather than drive home tipsy. Except the living room wasn't dark, and I wasn't asleep. And Trish was sitting on my couch with her lipstick smeared and her hair mussed, looking like exactly what she was, a woman who'd been kissing someone else's husband. Elena froze in the doorway, her evening purse clutched in one hand and her overnight bag in the other. For a moment, the three of us formed a perfect tableau of mutual destruction, like actors who'd forgotten their lines in the middle of a play nobody wanted to be performing. "Nick?" Elena's voice came out smaller than I'd heard it in years. "What's going on?" I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle around us like a heavy curtain. Trish remained on the couch, her face pale but defiant, like she'd made a decision and intended to stick with it regardless of the consequences. "I could ask you the same question," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "How was the gala?" Elena's eyes darted between Trish and me, taking in the scene with the quick assessment skills that made her so good at her job. The coffee mugs on the table, the way Trish's blouse was wrinkled, the fact that I was still wearing the same clothes I'd had on when she left. But they looked different now, disheveled. "The gala was fine," she said carefully. "It ran late, like I said it would. I was planning to stay at Trish's place, but—" She trailed off, finally noticing that her alibi was sitting in our living room at 3 in the morning, looking thoroughly compromised. "But Trish wasn't at her place," I finished. "She was here, with me." "I can explain," Trish said, standing up and smoothing down her skirt. But her voice lacked conviction, like she wasn't sure which explanation would work best. "Please do," Elena said, and now I could hear the edge creeping into her tone. "Explain why my best friend is in my house at 3 in the morning, looking like she's been doing things she shouldn't be doing with my husband." The irony was so thick, you could have cut it with a knife. Elena, who'd spent the evening in a hotel room with her boss, was standing in our living room, demanding explanations for behavior that was a pale shadow of her own deception. "She told me about Grant," I said simply. Elena's face went through a series of expressions so quickly it was like watching a slideshow. Confusion, denial, fear, anger, and finally a kind of cold calculation that I'd never seen before. "Told you what about Grant?" "Everything. The hotel rooms, the Tuesday and Thursday nights, the 5 months of lies." I walked closer to her, close enough to smell that new perfume again, close enough to see the guilt written in the lines around her eyes. "Room 412 at the Waterford Suites. That's where you've been tonight, isn't it?" Elena set down her overnight bag with deliberate care, like she was buying time to think. When she looked up again, her expression had hardened into something I didn't recognize. "So your response was to seduce my best friend?" "My response was to listen to someone who finally told me the truth. Everything else just happened." "Just happened?" Elena's voice rose an octave. "You don't accidentally end up making out with someone on our couch, Nick. You don't accidentally betray your marriage vows." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I actually laughed, which seemed to infuriate her even more. Are you seriously going to lecture me about marriage vows right now? You who've been having an affair with your boss for 5 months? That's different. How? How is it different? Because you and I have been over for a long time. We've been going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. What I did with Grant was honest about the reality of our situation. Honest? I shook my head in disbelief. You call lying to me for 5 months honest? You call making me look like an idiot in front of everyone we know honest? Trish cleared her throat, reminding us both that she was still there, still part of this disaster. Elena, she said quietly, you can't be angry about this. Not after what you've been doing. Elena turned on her with the fury of someone who'd been betrayed by her closest ally. I trusted you. I told you things I never told anyone else, and you used that information to seduce my husband. You asked me to lie for you. You asked me to be your alibi while you destroyed your marriage. I couldn't do it anymore. So, you decided to destroy it yourself? I decided to tell Nick the truth. What happened after that? Trish glanced at me, and I saw something like regret flicker across her face. What happened after that wasn't planned. Elena began pacing the length of the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood like an angry metronome. I could practically see her mind working, trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that had spiraled completely beyond her management. This is insane, she said finally. All of this is insane. We're adults. We should be able to handle this like civilized people. Civilized people don't have affairs, I pointed out. And civilized people don't retaliate by sleeping with their wife's best friend. We didn't sleep together. Oh, please, don't insult my intelligence. She was right, of course. We hadn't technically slept together, but we'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. We'd found comfort in each other's arms while she was finding comfort in Grant's bed, and the symmetry of it felt like some kind of cosmic justice. What do you want, Elena? What's the end game here? She stopped pacing and looked at me directly for the first time since she'd walked through the door. I want you to fight for us. I want you to care enough about this marriage to be angry about what I've done, not just use it as an excuse to do worse things yourself. Worse things? You've been having an affair for 5 months, and I kissed someone once. How is that worse? Because you chose Trish specifically to hurt me. You chose the one person whose betrayal would cut the deepest. I looked at Trish, who was standing by the window now, staring out at our quiet suburban street, like she was planning her escape route. Had I chosen her to hurt Elena, or had she chosen me for the same reason? Maybe, I admitted. Maybe part of me wanted you to feel what I've been feeling. Maybe part of me wanted you to know what it's like to have someone you trust stick a knife in your back. And how does it feel? Elena asked. Now that you've gotten your revenge, how does it feel? The honest answer was that it felt terrible and liberating at the same time. It felt like I'd finally stopped being the victim in my own life, but it also felt like I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who could kiss his wife's best friend and feel justified in doing it. It feels like we're even, I said. Even? Elena laughed bitterly. You think this makes us even? I think this makes us done. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Elena stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether this was a bluff she could call or a reality she needed to accept. Fine, she said finally. If that's how you want it, then fine. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. Don't expect me to just walk away and let you play the victim. I'm not playing anything. I'm just tired of pretending. She picked up her overnight bag and headed toward the stairs, then paused and turned back to Trish. I hope he was worth it, she said. I hope one night of feeling special was worth losing the only real friend you had. Trish flinched like she'd been slapped, but she didn't back down. At least I told him the truth. At least I didn't make him live in a lie for 5 months. No, you just made him live in a different lie. One where you're the hero and I'm the villain. You made yourself the villain, Elena. I just finally stopped helping you hide it. Elena climbed the stairs without another word, her heels echoing through the house like gunshots. A few minutes later, I heard the guest bedroom door slam shut. Not our bedroom, the guest bedroom. Even in her anger, she was making a statement about the new geography of our relationship. Trish and I stood in the living room, suddenly alone with the wreckage of everything we'd just destroyed. I should go, she said. Yeah, you should. Nick, I want you to know that I didn't plan this. I didn't call you tonight thinking it would lead to this. I know. But I'm not sorry it happened. I'm not sorry you know the truth. I walked her to the door, feeling like I was moving through a dream. Everything felt surreal and hyper-real at the same time, like I was experiencing life at a different frequency than usual. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. I guess we figure out how to clean up the mess we made. She kissed my cheek softly, a gesture that felt more like goodbye than hello. For what it's worth, I think you deserve better than what she was giving you. After she left, I sat on the couch and stared at the television, which was still playing its mindless reality show. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd just lived through more drama than anything those people could manufacture for entertainment. Upstairs, I could hear Elena moving around, opening and closing drawers with more force than necessary. She was packing, I realized. Really packing, not just grabbing clothes for another fake sleepover. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I thought it might be Trish, but it was from Maddie. Heard the shouting. Are you and Mom getting divorced? I stared at the message for a long time, trying to figure out how to answer. How do you tell your 16-year-old daughter that her parents' marriage just imploded in the span of 3 hours? How do you explain that sometimes adults make choices that hurt everyone, including themselves? We'll talk in the morning, I typed back. That's not an answer, Dad. It's the only answer I have right now. I turned off the television and sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of my marriage ending. Elena's footsteps above me, the scrape of hangers in the closet, the zip of suitcases being packed. The house settling around us like it was trying to adjust to the new reality. Tomorrow, I would have to figure out how to explain this to Maddie. Tomorrow, I would have to call a lawyer and start the process of untangling a life I'd spent 12 years building. Tomorrow, I would have to face the consequences of every choice I'd made tonight. But right now, I just sat in the dark and waited for the sun to come up on whatever came next. At dawn, I heard Elena's car pull out of the driveway. She didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, didn't try to have one last conversation about where we went wrong. She just left, taking her suitcases and her secrets and her new perfume with her. I was still sitting on the couch when Maddie came downstairs for breakfast, dressed for school and carrying the backpack she'd had since freshman year. She looked at me for a moment, taking in my rumpled clothes and the coffee mug still sitting on the table. So it's really over? She asked. Yeah, kiddo. I think it really is. She nodded like she'd been expecting this answer for a while. Good, she said, which surprised me. Maybe now we can stop pretending everything is fine. After she left for school, I finally went upstairs to survey the damage. Elena had cleared out most of her clothes, her jewelry, her personal items. The guest bedroom looked like a tornado had hit it, with drawers pulled open and hangers scattered across the floor. On the dresser, she'd left her wedding ring. I picked it up and held it to the light, remembering the day I'd slipped it onto her finger in front of everyone we loved. We'd been so young then, so certain that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. So naive about the ways that people could disappoint each other, hurt each other, betray each other without meaning to. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Ray, my best friend and the owner of the boxing gym where I'd been working out for the past 10 years. Heard through the grapevine that you had some excitement last night, he said without preamble. News travels fast in this town. Mrs. Loomis saw Elena leave at dawn with suitcases. She's been calling everyone she knows. Mrs. Loomis. our 70-year-old neighbor who treated the subdivision like her personal soap opera. Of course, she'd been watching. "It's over, Ray. The marriage, I mean. It's been over for a while, but now it's officially over. You want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "You want to hit something?" "That sounds better. Gym's open. Come work out some of that anger before you do something stupid with it." I hung up and looked around the bedroom one more time. Elena's absence was already changing the space, making it feel larger and emptier at the same time. This had been our sanctuary once, the place where we'd planned our future and shared our dreams. Now it just felt like a room where two people had slept next to each other without really connecting. I showered, changed clothes, and drove to Ray's gym, which occupied a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. It smelled like sweat and leather and the kind of honest effort that I'd been missing in my life lately. Ray was waiting for me with boxing gloves and the heavy bag, understanding without being told that I needed to hit something more than I needed to talk. For the next hour, I pounded out my frustration against the leather and sand, feeling the impact travel up my arms and into my shoulders. Each punch was a question I couldn't answer, a choice I couldn't take back, a piece of anger I needed to release before it poisoned everything else. When I was finally exhausted, Ray handed me a towel and a bottle of water. "Feel better?" "A little." "Good. Now we can talk about what you're going to do next." "I'm going to hire a lawyer and try to keep my daughter in my house. That's the practical stuff. I'm talking about the other stuff, the revenge stuff." I looked at him sharply. "What makes you think I want revenge?" "Because I know you. Because you've been coming to this gym for 10 years, and I've seen how you fight when you're angry. You don't just get mad, Nick, you get even." He was right, of course. Even as I'd been sitting in that dark living room, even as I'd been kissing Trish and listening to Elena's footsteps upstairs, part of my mind had been calculating, planning, figuring out how to make sure that Elena and Grant didn't get to walk away from this without consequences. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Ray smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "I had in mind that we make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people they really are." The next morning brought the kind of crystal-clear autumn day that makes suburbia look like a movie set. All golden leaves and perfect lawns, and the illusion that everything beneath the surface is as pristine as the carefully maintained facades. I stood in my driveway, drinking coffee from a mug that still smelled faintly like Elena's lipstick, and watched Mrs. Loomis pretend to check her mailbox while obviously trying to catch my attention. She'd been our neighbor for 8 years, a widow who'd turned nosiness into an art form and gossip into a full-time occupation. Normally, I avoided her like a root canal, but today I found myself walking over to the property line that separated our driveways. "Morning, Mrs. Loomis." "Oh, Nick!" She clutched her robe dramatically, as if I'd startled her instead of walking directly into her line of sight. "I hope everything is all right. I couldn't help but notice some commotion last night. Just some late-night visitors. Nothing to worry about. And Elena left so early this morning, with luggage." Her eyes gleamed with the anticipation of someone who lived for other people's drama. "Elena's staying with friends for a while. We're taking some time to figure things out." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't exactly the truth either. Elena was probably staying at Grant's place, or maybe she'd gotten her own apartment. I hadn't asked, and she hadn't volunteered the information during our brief, hostile text exchange about picking up more of her belongings. "Oh my," Mrs. Loomis said, not even trying to hide her excitement. "I hope it's nothing serious." "These things happen," I said, with a shrug that I hoped conveyed casual indifference rather than the churning mixture of anger and hurt that was actually consuming me. "Well, if there's anything I can do to help." She trailed off meaningfully, and I realized she was fishing for more details to share with her network of neighborhood informants. "Actually," I said, struck by sudden inspiration, "there is something. Elena's been getting some packages delivered here for her work projects, but she's forgotten to update her address. If you see any delivery trucks, could you let them know she's not living here anymore?" Mrs. Loomis's eyes widened with the joy of someone who'd just been given official permission to spread gossip. "Of course, dear. I'll make sure everyone knows that Elena has moved out." I thanked her and walked back to my house, already feeling the first small satisfaction of a plan beginning to take shape. By noon, everyone in the neighborhood would know that Elena had left. By evening, the speculation about why would be spreading through every coffee shop and grocery store in town. Inside, I found Maddie eating cereal at the kitchen counter, her phone propped against a box of granola as she scrolled through social media with the focused intensity that only teenagers could maintain. "Dad," she said without looking up, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Shoot. Are you and Mom getting divorced because she was cheating on you?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "What makes you ask that?" "Because I'm not stupid, and because Jenna Morrison's mom works at the Waterford Hotel. She saw Mom there last night with her boss. Jenna Morrison, whose mother worked in hotel management, and whose family attended the same school functions we did. Of course. In a town this size, secrets had the lifespan of mayflies. Your mother and I have been having problems for a while," I said carefully. "The cheating is just part of it." "But she was cheating." "Yes." Maddie nodded and took another spoonful of cereal, processing this information with the matter-of-fact acceptance that teenagers sometimes displayed about adult failures. "Are you going to try to get back at her?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to do something to make her sorry? Because if you are, I want you to know that I won't be mad about it." I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of the child she'd been just a few years ago. But all I saw was a young woman who'd been watching her parents' marriage disintegrate and drawing her own conclusions about justice and consequences. "Why wouldn't you be mad?" "Because she embarrassed you. She embarrassed our whole family. And she's been treating you like garbage for months, acting like you were the problem when she was the one sneaking around." The venom in her voice surprised me. I'd thought Maddie was closer to Elena, that she'd naturally side with her mother in any conflict between us, but apparently, she'd been paying more attention than either of us had realized. "I don't want you to worry about adult problems," I said. "Too late for that, Dad. I've been worrying about adult problems since I figured out that Mom was lying about working late every week." She finished her cereal and put the bowl in the dishwasher, with the kind of aggressive efficiency that suggested she had strong feelings about the current state of our household. "For what it's worth," she said, grabbing her backpack, "I think Mom's boss is a creep. He came to my school career day last year and spent the whole time hitting on Mrs. Patterson." After she left for school, I sat in the kitchen and thought about what she'd said. Grant had been at Maddie's career day, representing the advertising industry, and apparently using the opportunity to flirt with her teacher. The image of him in a high school gymnasium, surrounded by teenagers, while he tried to charm a married woman, filled me with a disgust that went beyond mere jealousy. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. "Gym's closed today, but my office is open if you want to talk strategy." Ray's office was actually the back room of his gym, where he kept files on all his fighters and a computer that he used to manage the business side of training amateur boxers. But it was private, and privacy was exactly what I needed right now. I drove across town, past the strip malls and chain restaurants that formed the commercial backbone of our community. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but I felt like I was seeing it through different eyes. The coffee shop, where Elena and I used to have weekend breakfast. The bookstore where we'd browsed for anniversary gifts. The restaurant where we'd celebrated promotions and birthdays and the small milestones of a life we'd thought we were building together. All of it felt like evidence of a crime now, props in an elaborate deception that had been playing out right under my nose. Ray was waiting for me with coffee and the kind of serious expression that meant he'd been thinking about our conversation from yesterday. You ready to hear some hard truths? He asked. Shoot. Elena's not going to just disappear quietly. She's going to try to control the narrative, make herself look like the victim, and you look like the bad guy. She's going to use every advantage she has, her job, her connections, her ability to spin a story, to make sure she comes out of this looking good. And if you want to prevent that, you need to get ahead of the story. You need to make sure people know what really happened before she has a chance to rewrite history. I leaned back in my chair, considering the implications of what he was suggesting. You're talking about a public relations war. I'm talking about survival. Elena works in advertising, Nick. She knows how to sell a story, how to make people believe whatever version of events serves her best. If you don't fight back, she's going to destroy your reputation while she rebuilds hers. What do you suggest? Ray pulled out his phone and showed me a video that had been posted to social media the night before. It was security footage from the Waterford Hotel, grainy and black and white, showing Elena and Grant entering the building together around 9 o'clock. They weren't holding hands or obviously intimate, but there was something about their body language that suggested familiarity, comfort, the kind of easy physical proximity that comes from spending a lot of time together. Where did you get this? I asked. I know a guy who works security at the hotel. He's been saving footage of their regular visits for the past few months, just in case someone ever needed proof of what was going on. That's thorough of him. He's been through a messy divorce himself. He knows how these things go. I stared at the video, watching my wife walk into a hotel with another man while I'd been at home working on a car engine and trusting her story about a work function. The betrayal felt fresh all over again, like picking at a wound that hadn't started healing yet. What do you want me to do with this? I want you to think about it. I want you to consider what Elena's going to do when she realizes that people are talking, when she figures out that her secret isn't secret anymore. She's going to blame me. She's going to do more than blame you. She's going to go on the offensive. She's going to tell everyone who'll listen that you were a terrible husband, that you drove her into Grant's arms, that you're vindictive and unstable and probably abusive. The word abusive hit me like a physical blow. I've never laid a hand on her. Doesn't matter. Once that accusation is out there, it takes on a life of its own. People start looking at you differently, wondering if maybe there's some truth to it. Your business suffers, your relationships suffer, your relationship with Maddie suffers. So what's the alternative? The alternative is that you make sure your version of the story gets out first. You make sure people understand that Elena was the one who broke your marriage vows, who lied and cheated and betrayed the trust of everyone who cared about her. Ray showed me another video, this one from earlier in the evening, showing Elena leaving our house in her cocktail dress and overnight bag. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m., and she looked excited, anticipatory, like someone going to meet a lover rather than attend a boring work function. You've been documenting this, I realized. I've been preparing for war, because that's what this is, Nick. Elena fired the first shot when she started sleeping with her boss. Now you get to decide whether you're going to surrender or fight back. I thought about Maddie's question that morning, about whether I was planning to make Elena sorry for what she'd done. I thought about Mrs. Loomis's eager willingness to spread gossip throughout the neighborhood. I thought about Grant at my daughter's career day, using his position and authority to flirt with her teacher while his wife was at home, and his affair with Elena was just beginning. What did you have in mind? I asked. Ray smiled, and this time it was definitely not a nice smile. I had in mind that we show this whole town exactly what kind of people Elena and Grant really are. I had in mind that we make sure they face some real consequences for their choices. Without breaking any laws. Without breaking any laws, he agreed, but also without pulling any punches. He outlined his plan, and I had to admit it was both comprehensive and clever. Social media posts that would spread the truth faster than any traditional gossip network. Anonymous tips to Elena's HR department, about the inappropriate relationship between a supervisor and his direct report. Carefully orchestrated encounters that would force Elena and Grant to confront the reality of their situation in public settings. "It's not about revenge," Ray said. "It's about justice. It's about making sure that people who hurt others face consequences for their actions. And if it destroys Elena's career, then maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to have an affair with her boss." I left Ray's office with a thumb drive full of security footage and a head full of possibilities. For the first time since Trish's phone call had shattered my world, I felt like I had some control over what happened next. But I also felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something that would change me permanently. Once I started down this path, there would be no going back to the man I'd been before. No returning to the comfortable illusion that good people always win and bad people always lose. Elena had made her choice when she decided to betray our marriage. Grant had made his choice when he decided to pursue a relationship with a married subordinate. Now, it was time for me to make mine. That evening, I uploaded the first video to a social media account I'd created using a fake name. I wrote a simple caption: "When your spouse says they're working late, but hotel security footage tells a different story." Within an hour, it had been shared 50 times. Within 3 hours, it had been shared 500 times. By morning, everyone in town would know that Elena Morrison had been caught on camera entering a hotel with her boss while her husband was at home, trusting her lies and working on a car in his garage. The war had begun. The video went viral in the way that small-town scandals do, not with millions of views, but with the kind of concentrated, intense attention that meant everyone who mattered in our community had seen it within 24 hours. My phone started ringing at 7 in the morning and didn't stop until I finally turned it off around noon. Elena called first, her voice shaking with a combination of rage and panic that I'd never heard before. "What have you done?" she demanded without preamble. "I shared some security footage," I said calmly. "Perfectly legal security footage that shows exactly where you were on Saturday night. You posted it online for everyone to see. You humiliated me in front of the entire town. I documented the truth. If that humiliates you, maybe you should have made different choices. Nick, this is insane. This is vindictive and cruel and completely disproportionate to what? To finding out that my wife has been lying to me for 5 months? To discovering that everyone in town knew about your affair except me?" The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end. "I want you to take it down," she said finally. "No. I'm serious, Nick. Take it down, or I'll make you regret it." "How? By having another affair? By lying to me some more? By making me look like even more of an idiot than I already do? By telling everyone what you did with Trish? By making sure they know that you're not the innocent victim you're pretending to be?" I'd been expecting this threat, had actually been surprised it had taken her this long to make it. "Go ahead," I said. "Tell everyone that I kissed your best friend after she told me about your affair. Tell them that I sought comfort with someone who was honest with me after months of living with someone who wasn't. See how much sympathy you get." "You're not thinking clearly. You're angry and hurt, and you're making decisions that are going to have consequences you haven't considered. The only consequences I'm worried about are the ones you're going to face when your boss's wife finds out what's been going on." Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Sophie Grant is going to be very interested in seeing that hotel footage, along with the photos from your other visits, and the credit card receipts from all those romantic dinners you've been having." "You don't have credit card receipts." "Don't I?" The truth was that I didn't, but Elena's guilty conscience was filling in the blanks for me. She was imagining evidence that didn't exist, which meant there was probably evidence that did exist that I hadn't even thought to look for yet. "Nick, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can figure out how to fix this without destroying each other." "There's nothing to fix, Elena. You made your choice when you decided to have an affair. I'm just making sure everyone knows what that choice was. I hung up and immediately called Ray. Phase 1 is complete, I told him. Elena's panicking. Good, that means it's working. You ready for Phase 2? Phase 2 involved Sophie Grant, who had agreed to meet me at a coffee shop on the other side of town. Ray had reached out to her through mutual connections, carefully feeling out whether she knew about her husband's affair and whether she might be interested in comparing notes with the other betrayed spouse. She was waiting for me at a corner table, a woman in her early 40s with the kind of careful composure that suggested she'd been expecting this conversation for a while. She was attractive in an understated way, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Morrison," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Call me Nick, and thank you for agreeing to see me." We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a moment, two people who had nothing in common except the fact that our spouses were betraying us with each other. "How long have you known?" I asked finally. "About the affair?" 3 months, maybe longer. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Grant started working late more often, taking weekend trips for client meetings that didn't seem to correspond with any actual clients. He bought new clothes, started going to the gym, got a haircut that made him look 10 years younger. "Did you confront him?" "I hired a private investigator." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "I have photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts, phone records. Everything you could possibly need to prove that they've been having an affair." She slid the folder across the table to me, and I opened it with the kind of morbid curiosity that compels people to slow down and stare at car accidents. The photographs were professionally taken, clearly shot with a telephoto lens from a distance. Elena and Grant holding hands across a restaurant table. Elena and Grant kissing in the parking lot of a hotel. Elena and Grant entering and leaving various locations that were definitely not work-related. "Why didn't you use this?" I asked. "Because I was trying to decide whether I wanted to save my marriage or end it. Grant and I have been together for 15 years. We have a history, shared investments, mutual friends. Destroying him would have meant destroying myself too. And now? Now I've decided that some things are more important than convenience." Her voice was calm, but I could see the anger burning behind her eyes. "Grant made his choice when he decided to risk our marriage for a few months of excitement with a married woman. Elena made her choice when she decided to pursue a relationship with her boss, knowing that it could destroy his marriage as well as her own. What do you want to do about it?" Sophie smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me glad I was on her side rather than opposing her. "I want to make sure they both understand that actions have consequences. I want to make sure that their affair costs them something more significant than a few moments of guilt." She outlined her plan, which was both more sophisticated and more devastating than anything Ray and I had discussed. Sophie had connections throughout the professional community, relationships built over 15 years of being the supportive wife of a successful businessman. She knew which clients valued family stability in their business partners, which professional organizations had strict codes of conduct regarding workplace relationships, which social circles would ostracize someone who had violated the basic rules of marriage and friendship. "Grant's up for a promotion," she said. "Senior partner at the agency, which would make him one of the most powerful people in the local advertising industry. The decision is being made by a committee of conservative businessmen who care very much about personal integrity and professional ethics. And they wouldn't approve of him having an affair with a subordinate. They would not, especially when that affair involves someone who's married to a member of the community, someone whose family has been damaged by their relationship." She showed me a list of names, people who served on various boards and committees throughout the city, people who could influence Grant's career prospects, Elena's professional reputation, their ability to find new jobs if their current positions became untenable. "This isn't just about revenge," Sophie said. This is about making sure that people who betray their families and their professional obligations face real consequences for those choices. What do you need from me? I need you to be willing to tell your story publicly. I need you to be the face of the betrayed husband, the sympathetic victim whose marriage was destroyed by their selfishness. And in return? In return, I make sure that Grant and Elena lose everything that matters to them professionally, their jobs, their reputations, their ability to work in this industry, in this town. I thought about Elena's ambition, the way she'd talked about her career goals and her determination to succeed in the competitive world of advertising. I thought about Grant's arrogance, the way he'd used his position to pursue a relationship with a married subordinate while maintaining his own marriage as a facade. When do we start? I asked. We already have. The video you posted yesterday has been shared with several members of the promotion committee. By tomorrow, everyone who matters in the business community will have seen it. And Elena's job? Elena reports directly to Grant, which means their relationship creates a hostile work environment for everyone else in the department. HR is going to have to investigate, and when they do, they're going to find a pattern of inappropriate behavior that violates multiple company policies. Sophie gathered up the photographs and put them back in the folder, but she left the list of names on the table between us. There's one more thing, she said. Grant has been embezzling money from client accounts to pay for his affair expenses. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts for Elena. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to constitute fraud. You have proof of this? I have bank statements and credit card records that show charges to the company card for personal expenses. I have receipts that prove the charges were for romantic encounters rather than business meetings. That could send him to prison. It could. But I'm not interested in sending him to prison. I'm interested in making sure he can never work in this industry again. I understood the distinction. Prison would be temporary, but professional ruin would be permanent. Grant would lose his career, his reputation, his ability to support the lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to. Elena would lose her job, her professional connections, her dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. What about collateral damage? I asked. Other people who might get hurt by this. You mean like your daughter? Like my children? Sophie's expression hardened. Grant and Elena should have thought about collateral damage before they decided to have an affair. They should have considered who might get hurt when their lies inevitably came to light. She was right, of course. Maddie was already hurt by the divorce, already dealing with the social embarrassment of having her family's private drama become public knowledge. My reputation in the community was already damaged by the revelation that I'd been oblivious to my wife's affair for months. All right, I said. Let's do it. Sophie smiled and shook my hand across the table, sealing our alliance with the kind of firm grip that suggested she'd been preparing for this moment for months. Welcome to the war, Nick. I think you're going to find it's more satisfying than you expected. That evening, I received a phone call from Grant himself. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger, the tone of a man who was used to being in control and didn't appreciate having that control challenged. We need to talk, he said. I don't think we do. You're making a mistake, Nick. You're letting your emotions drive you to do things that are going to have serious consequences. For who? For you and Elena. For everyone involved, including your daughter. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Grant was suggesting that my actions could somehow hurt Maddie, that I should back down to protect her from the fallout of his and Elena's choices. My daughter is already dealing with the consequences of your affair, I said. She's already embarrassed and hurt and confused about why the adults in her life couldn't behave like decent human beings. This doesn't have to get worse. We can handle this privately, work out some kind of arrangement that protects everyone's interests. What kind of arrangement? Elena and I end our relationship. She comes back to you, you go to counseling, you work on rebuilding your marriage. I stay with Sophie, focus on my family and my career. Everyone moves on. I laughed, genuinely amused by his arrogance. You think I want Elena back? After 5 months of lies and betrayal, You think I want to work on rebuilding a relationship with someone who's proven she can't be trusted? I think you want what's best for your family. I think you want to minimize the damage to your daughter and your reputation in the community. My reputation is already damaged, Grant. The question is whether yours is going to be damaged too. Don't threaten me, Nick. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I think I have a pretty good idea. I think I'm dealing with a man who's been stealing from his company to finance an affair with a married subordinate. I think I'm dealing with someone whose wife has been collecting evidence of his infidelity for months. The line went quiet, and I could practically hear Grant recalculating his position. Sophie told you about the financial irregularities. Sophie told me about a lot of things. Turns out betrayed spouses have a lot to talk about when they get together. What do you want? I want you and Elena to face the consequences of your choices. I want you to lose your jobs, your reputations, and your ability to hurt other people the way you've hurt your families. And if we don't cooperate with your revenge fantasy, then Sophie and I make sure that everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people you are. We make sure that your professional lives are over, that your social lives are over, that you spend the rest of your time here dealing with the consequences of betraying people who trusted you. Grant hung up without another word, but I knew the conversation had accomplished its purpose. He understood that Sophie and I were working together, that we had evidence of his financial improprieties, and that we were prepared to use that evidence to destroy him professionally. The next morning, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by Elena's car. She was sitting behind the wheel, still wearing the same clothes she'd had on the day before, looking like she hadn't slept at all. I walked out to meet her, curious about what new strategy she'd developed overnight. "Get in," she said through the rolled-down window. "I'm fine standing here." "Get in the car, Nick. We need to talk, and I don't want the neighbors to overhear." I climbed into the passenger seat, immediately noticing the smell of stale coffee and desperation that seemed to cling to everything in the car. "Grant's been fired," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. You're thrilled. You and Sophie orchestrated this whole thing to destroy our careers. Sophie and I documented the truth about your affair. If that destroyed Grant's career, maybe he shouldn't have been having an affair with his subordinate. I'm going to be fired too. HR called me in yesterday afternoon, asked me about my relationship with Grant, showed me the video you posted online." "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth, that Grant and I have been having a personal relationship for several months, that we tried to keep it separate from our professional responsibilities, that we never intended for it to affect our work." "And they believed you?" "They suspended me pending a full investigation. They're going through our emails, our phone records, our travel expenses. They're interviewing everyone in the department about whether our relationship created a hostile work environment." I felt a moment of satisfaction at the thought of Elena having to explain her choices to a room full of HR professionals, having to justify months of lies and deception to people whose job it was to maintain workplace integrity. "I'm sorry it's come to this," I said, and I was surprised to realize that part of me actually meant it. "Are you? Are you really sorry? Or are you just saying that because you think it's what a good person would say?" It was a fair question. Was I sorry that Elena was losing her job, or was I satisfied that she was finally facing consequences for her choices? Was I the victim in this situation, or had I become something else entirely? "I'm sorry that it had to come to this," I said finally. "I'm sorry that you made choices that led to this outcome. But you're not sorry that you've been working to destroy my career?" "No, I'm not sorry about that." Elena nodded like she'd been expecting that answer. "Then you need to understand that I'm not going to go quietly. If you're determined to destroy my professional life, then I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to tell everyone about Trish. It means I'm going to make sure they know that you responded to my affair by seducing my best friend in our living room while our daughter was upstairs sleeping." "Go ahead, tell them." It means I'm going to tell them about the other women too. I stared at her, genuinely confused. What other women? The other women you've been with since you found out about Grant. The waitress at Murphy's bar, the woman from your gym, the neighbor who's been bringing you casseroles since I moved out. Elena, there are no other women. I kissed Trish once, and that's it. That's not what people are going to hear. That's not the story I'm going to tell. I realized what she was doing, and I had to admire the strategy even as it disgusted me. Elena was going to lie about my behavior, create a fictional narrative that painted me as a serial cheater who had responded to her single affair by having multiple affairs of my own. No one will believe you, won't they? You've already admitted to being with Trish. How hard do you think it will be to convince people that there were others? Especially when I have photos of you talking to various women around town, when I have witnesses who can testify that you've been acting strangely since our separation. You're going to destroy innocent people's reputations just to get back at me? I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm not the only one who loses everything in this situation. Elena started the car, signaling that our conversation was over. You started a war, Nick, but you're not the only one who knows how to fight. As she drove away, I stood in my driveway and realized that I had seriously underestimated my opponent. Elena wasn't just going to accept defeat gracefully. She was going to escalate the conflict, drag innocent people into our mutual destruction, and make sure that everyone involved paid a price for the choices she and Grant had made. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. 3 days later, Elena made good on her threat. The story appeared on a local gossip blog that specialized in suburban drama and small-town scandals. The headline read, "Local car dealers' revenge affairs, how one man's response to infidelity became a pattern of predatory behavior." The article was a masterpiece of calculated destruction, carefully crafted to sound believable while being almost entirely fictional. It described me as a man who had responded to his wife's single indiscretion by embarking on a campaign of seduction that targeted vulnerable women throughout the community. It named names, Trish, obviously, but also Sarah, the waitress from Murphy's bar, Jennifer from Ray's gym, and even Mrs. Patterson, Maddie's former teacher. Each accusation was carefully constructed to contain just enough truth to be plausible. Yes, I had talked to Sarah at the bar the night I picked up Trish. Yes, I had been working out more frequently at Ray's gym since the separation. Yes, I had attended parent-teacher conferences where I'd interacted with Mrs. Patterson. But Elena had twisted these innocent interactions into evidence of a predatory pattern, painting me as a man who used his wife's infidelity as an excuse to prey on women who felt sorry for him. The article quoted anonymous sources, women who claimed I had made inappropriate advances, neighbors who had observed suspicious behavior, even a supposed expert on infidelity who explained how betrayed spouses sometimes develop compulsive behaviors as a way of regaining control. It was brilliant, devastating, and completely fabricated. My phone started ringing before I'd finished reading the article. Sarah from Murphy's bar, confused and upset about being named in connection with an affair she'd never had. Jennifer from the gym, angry that her reputation was being dragged into someone else's marital drama. Mrs. Patterson, who was threatening to sue for defamation if I didn't publicly refute the claims about our supposed relationship. But the most painful call came from Maddie. "Dad," she said, her voice small and hurt in a way that made my chest tighten. "Everyone at school is talking about this article. They're saying horrible things about you, about our family. Maddie, you know none of it's true, right? You know I would never—" "I know, Dad. I know you didn't do those things, but everyone else believes it. They're looking at me like I'm the daughter of some kind of predator." I closed my eyes and tried to think of something to say that would make this better, some way to protect my daughter from the consequences of the war I'd started with her mother. "I'm going to fix this," I promised. "How? How are you going to fix it when Mom has already convinced everyone that you're a terrible person?" It was a fair question, and I didn't have a good answer. Elena had outmaneuvered me, turned my attempt at exposing her affair into evidence of my own moral failings. She'd used the community's willingness to believe the worst about people to destroy my reputation while simultaneously rehabilitating her own. After I hung up with Maddie, I called Ray and asked him to meet me at his gym. I needed to hit something, and I needed advice from someone who understood the rules of combat. "She played this perfectly," Ray said after I'd finished explaining the situation. "She took your strength, the fact that you were the wronged party, and turned it into a weakness. Now you look like the aggressor, and she looks like the victim of your vindictive behavior. So what do? You fight back, but you fight back smart, not angry." Ray pulled out his phone and showed me a series of screenshots he'd taken from social media. Elena had been busy in the days since Grant's firing, carefully crafting a narrative that painted her as a woman who had made a single mistake and was now being systematically destroyed by a vindictive ex-husband. She'd posted photos of herself looking sad and vulnerable, accompanied by captions about learning from mistakes and trying to rebuild after betrayal. She'd shared articles about emotional abuse and psychological manipulation, subtly suggesting that my behavior was part of a larger pattern of controlling conduct. Most effectively, she'd positioned herself as a working woman whose career was being destroyed by a man who couldn't handle her professional success. "She's good," I admitted. "She's very good. But she made one mistake." "What's that?" "She involved innocent people in her lies. Sarah, Jennifer, Mrs. Patterson, they're all going to be angry about being dragged into this, and angry people sometimes do unpredictable things." Ray was right. Within hours of the article's publication, I started receiving calls from the women Elena had named. But instead of anger directed at me, I heard anger directed at her. "I've never even had a real conversation with you," Sarah told me. "We exchanged maybe 50 words total that night at the bar, and now she's telling people we had an affair? I'm married, Nick. My husband is furious, my kids are embarrassed, and my boss is questioning whether I should be serving alcohol to men if I can't maintain appropriate boundaries." Jennifer was even more direct. "Elena Morrison just destroyed my reputation to save her own. I'm going to make sure she regrets it." Mrs. Patterson was the angriest of all. "I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've never had my professional integrity questioned. If Elena thinks she can drag me into her marital drama without consequences, she's about to learn otherwise." By the end of the day, I had something I hadn't expected: allies, women who had been falsely accused of having affairs with me, who were now motivated to expose Elena's lies and protect their own reputations. Ray helped me organize our response. Instead of trying to defend myself against Elena's accusations, we went on the offensive. We gathered evidence that proved the impossibility of her claims. Security footage showing that I hadn't been at the locations where the supposed affairs had taken place. Witnesses who could testify to the actual nature of my interactions with the women she'd named. Phone records that demonstrated the limited extent of my contact with anyone outside my immediate circle of friends and family. More importantly, we documented Elena's pattern of deception. Ray had been collecting evidence of her affair for weeks, building a comprehensive file that showed the extent of her lies and manipulation. We had hotel receipts, restaurant bills, phone records, and witness statements that painted a picture of a woman who had been systematically betraying her family while constructing elaborate deceptions to cover her tracks. "The truth is going to come out," Ray told me as we prepared our counterattack. "The question is whether you want to control how it comes out, or whether you want to let Elena keep setting the narrative." I chose control. The next morning, I called a press conference. It sounds dramatic for a small-town marital dispute, but Ray had connections with local media, and the story had already generated enough interest to warrant coverage. I stood in front of the courthouse, flanked by Sarah, Jennifer, and Mrs. Patterson, and told the truth about Elena's affair, her lies, and her recent attempt to destroy innocent people's reputations to cover her own tracks. My wife had an affair with her boss for 5 months, I said, reading from a prepared statement. When I discovered this affair and made it public, she responded by fabricating stories about me having relationships with women I barely know. She has dragged innocent people into our personal drama and damaged their reputations to protect her own. I presented the evidence methodically: the hotel security footage, the credit card receipts, the phone records that documented Elena's deception. Then I presented the evidence that disproved her claims about my supposed affairs: alibis, witnesses, and documentation that showed the impossibility of her accusations. Elena Morrison is not the victim of an abusive ex-husband, I concluded. She is a woman who betrayed her family, lied to her community, and is now trying to destroy innocent people to avoid facing the consequences of her own choices. The press conference was covered by every local news outlet and shared widely on social media. Within hours, the narrative had shifted again. Elena went from being a sympathetic victim to being exposed as a manipulative liar who was willing to destroy anyone who stood in the way of her self-preservation. But Elena wasn't finished fighting. That evening, she showed up at my house with Grant, both of them looking like they'd been planning their next move for hours. I met them at the front door, not inviting them in but not retreating either. "You think you've won," Elena said, her voice shaking with rage. "You think you've destroyed us and walked away clean. I think I've told the truth. If that destroyed you, maybe you shouldn't have built your life on lies." "The truth?" Grant laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you're a vindictive, obsessive man who couldn't handle the fact that his wife found someone better. The truth is that you're an embezzler who used company money to finance an affair with a married subordinate." Grant's face went pale. That's exactly what it is. Sophie has the receipts, Grant. She has bank statements showing that you used your corporate credit card for personal expenses related to your affair. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts for Elena, all of it paid for with money that belonged to your clients. Those were legitimate business expenses. Really? Which client were you entertaining at the Waterford Suites every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 5 months? Elena stepped between us, recognizing that Grant was about to say something that would make their situation worse. "What do you want, Nick? What's it going to take for you to stop this campaign of destruction?" "I want you both to leave town. I want you to find jobs somewhere else, start over somewhere else, and stop trying to drag innocent people into the consequences of your choices." "And if we don't?" "Then Sophie and I make sure that everyone in the professional community knows about Grant's embezzlement. We make sure that neither of you ever works in this industry again. We make sure that your names become synonymous with dishonesty and betrayal." Elena and Grant exchanged a look that told me they'd already considered this possibility, already weighed the costs of staying and fighting versus the benefits of starting over somewhere else. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" Elena asked. "Not until you face real consequences for what you've done." "And what about your consequences? What about the fact that you've become someone you don't recognize, someone who's willing to destroy people to get what he wants?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself more and more frequently. Had I become the villain in this story? Had my pursuit of justice turned into something darker, something that said more about my character than about Elena's? "Maybe," I admitted. "Maybe I have become someone I don't recognize. But you made me into this person, Elena. You and Grant created this situation with your lies and your betrayal and your refusal to accept responsibility for your choices. So, this is our fault? Everything you've done, every person you've hurt in your quest for revenge, that's all our fault?" "Yes, it is." Elena stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something like recognition in her eyes. She was finally seeing me clearly, finally understanding that the man she'd married no longer existed. In his place was someone harder, someone willing to use any weapon available to achieve his goals. "Then I guess we're all getting what we deserve," she said. 3 weeks later, Elena and Grant left town. They'd both lost their jobs, their professional reputations, and most of their social connections. Grant's wife had filed for divorce and was seeking a significant portion of his assets as compensation for his infidelity and financial improprieties. Elena had been forced to move back in with her parents while she looked for work in a different city, her career in advertising effectively over. The women Elena had falsely accused had each received public apologies and had seen their reputations restored. Sarah got a promotion at the bar, Jennifer started her own personal training business, and Mrs. Patterson received a commendation from the school district for her years of dedicated service. Maddie came to live with me full-time, having decided that she preferred the stability of staying in one place to the uncertainty of following her mother to whatever city would hire someone with Elena's tainted reputation. "Do you feel better?" she asked me one evening as we sat in the living room, both of us trying to figure out how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. "I feel like justice was served," I said. "That's not the same thing as feeling better." She was right, of course. I'd won the war, but victory felt different than I'd expected. I'd exposed Elena's lies, protected innocent people from her manipulations, and ensured that she and Grant faced consequences for their choices. But I'd also become someone I didn't entirely recognize, someone willing to use any means necessary to achieve his ends. "Do you think I went too far?" I asked. Maddie considered the question seriously, the way she'd been considering everything since our family had imploded. "I think you did what you had to do," she said finally. "I think Mom and Grant hurt a lot of people, and someone needed to make sure they couldn't keep doing it. But I also think you scared yourself. I think you discovered that you're capable of things you didn't know you were capable of, and now you're trying to figure out what that means." She was more perceptive than I'd given her credit for. I had scared myself, had found depths of ruthlessness and calculation that I hadn't known existed. The man who'd worked on cars in his garage and trusted his wife's stories about working late was gone, replaced by someone who documented evidence, manipulated narratives, and destroyed people's lives with methodical precision. "Was it worth it?" I asked. "Ask me in a few years," Maddie said, "when we see what kind of person you decide to be now that the war is over." That night, I sat in my garage and looked at the Mustang I'd been restoring. It was almost finished now, the engine purring smoothly, the bodywork complete, the interior restored to its original condition. It looked exactly like it had when it rolled off the assembly line in 1967, before decades of wear and damage had required extensive repair. But it wasn't the same car. The restoration process had changed it fundamentally, replaced original parts with new ones, covered old damage with fresh paint, rebuilt the engine with modern components. It looked like the original, but it was something else entirely, a hybrid of old and new, authentic and artificial, original and reconstructed. I realized I was looking at a metaphor for myself. The man Elena had betrayed was gone, just as surely as the car's original engine had been beyond repair. In his place was someone who looked the same from the outside, but had been fundamentally rebuilt, strengthened in some ways, but also hardened in others. Elena had called me a villain, and maybe she was right. Maybe the pursuit of justice had turned me into something darker than I'd intended to become. But if I was a villain, I was a villain who had protected innocent people, exposed lies, and ensured that actions had consequences. In our small town, in our particular war, maybe that was enough. The Mustang's engine hummed quietly in the darkness, restored and powerful and ready for whatever road lay ahead. Just like its owner, it had been broken down and rebuilt, damaged and repaired, transformed by necessity into something stronger than it had been before. Elena had wanted to know if I felt better, and the truth was complicated. I didn't feel better exactly, but I felt complete. I felt like someone who had faced a test of character and had chosen to fight rather than surrender, to seek justice rather than accept injustice, to become a villain if that's what it took to protect the people who mattered. The war was over, but the man who had fought it would never be the same. And maybe, I thought as I turned off the garage lights and headed back into the house where my daughter was waiting, that wasn't such a bad thing after all. In the end, Elena had been right about one thing. We had all gotten exactly what we deserved.